In Essential Task A10, we are briefly going to identify the symptoms and treatments of a variety of sleeping disorders and other examples of parasomnia, which are abnormal behaviors that can occur during sleep. The first three to the left are three sleeping disorders. We're going to talk about insomnia, narcolepsy, and then finally sleep apnea. And then all the way on the right, we're going to talk about some examples of parasomnia, some MREN3 behaviors or disorders that are more common in children. I'll return, though, to the task text, allow you to copy down the portion in yellow before proceeding into the concept map. We'll start, as we always do, on the left, talking about insomnia. Insomnia is a condition where the individual is experiencing reoccurring problems falling or staying asleep. So you could have an individual who does fall asleep, but then wakes up periodically through the night, interrupting the quality and quantity of their sleep. You also could have an individual who stays up way beyond the point of falling asleep, at least what would typically be a time to fall asleep, and then end up not falling asleep until 1 or 2 in the morning. In order to treat insomnia, what we're actually going to do is prescribe drugs that mimic either melatonin or GABA. So melatonin is the hormone that regulates your circadian rhythm in relation to your wake-sleep cycle. GABA is the neurotransmitter that we associated with relaxation earlier in this unit. The drugs that are used to treat insomnia on a chemical level are either going to mimic melatonin, the hormone in your body, or GABA, the neurotransmitter. But in either capacity, these drugs will do a reasonable job allowing the patient to not only fall asleep, but then remain sleeping throughout the entirety of the night. Next, we have a condition known as narcolepsy. In many ways, it's the opposite of insomnia. Instead of having an inability to fall asleep, individuals that suffer from narcolepsy have sudden unwarned attacks of wanting to fall asleep. So they could theoretically be in the classroom, taking notes, doing a homework, doing their tests, whatever it might happen to be, and then fall over, not only just fall over tired, but fall over into an actual state of sleep. Individuals that suffer from narcolepsy are typically prescribed forms of amphetamines. Amphetamines, as we talked about earlier in this unit, are classified as stimulants, meaning they will stimulate brain activity, which would be beneficial, of course, if we're trying to treat narcolepsy. It will ensure that the brain is constantly active and never shifts over into that uncontrollable sleeping state. In terms of causes, as is often the case with virtually every sleeping disorder and then eventually every psychological disorder when we get to our clinical psychology unit, twin studies suggest that there is a reasonable degree of heritability, meaning genetics plays a reasonable role in the manifestation of narcolepsy. I would like you to watch the clip all the way in the top right corner. It's a clip of a dog that is narcoleptic. It's actually more comedic than anything else, not that they would reference dogs on the AP exam. But the behavior of that dog and the example of narcolepsy in that clip is reminiscent of what this would look like if I showed you a clip of an individual suffering from narcolepsy. The third sleeping disorder to note is one known as sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is when individuals experience momentary stops in their breathing while sleeping. Oftentimes that actually can be sufficient enough to wake that individual up. As we'll talk about in a later essential task, you typically forget about 5 minutes before falling asleep every night. So if you were in the middle of the night and woke up because you stopped breathing, because of your snoring, which is often a byproduct of sleep apnea, you might wake up and fall back asleep so fast that you don't even remember waking up in the middle of the night. Those interruptions can be part of a bigger picture diagnosis of sleep apnea. Typically, to treat sleep apnea, there are a few different options. There's a surgery. There's also a breathing mask, a CPAP mask. You might have some familiarity with individuals that use the breathing mask. There's also machines that you could theoretically sleep beside that would actually help alleviate these symptoms. But when you stop breathing in the middle of the night, that has a lot of really major detrimental effects on your health. As a result, we really do want to treat sleep apnea as fast as possible. If you're comfortable wearing the breathing CPAP mask, you could theoretically wear it. That would alleviate your symptoms. It works pretty well. But again, you would have to be comfortable wearing it every single night. It's not a one-off. It's not a 2-week treatment. It is a forever treatment. Do watch the clip in the bottom right corner if you haven't already done so. It's a clip where not only do you see sleep apnea diagnosed, you also see an EEG used to study sleep. So you'll see both ends of it. And then you'll also see Shaquille O'Neal be fitted for a breathing mask to alleviate his sleep apnea symptoms. The last are not necessarily sleeping disorders. They can be part of a diagnosis of some types of sleeping disorders that we're not going to get into, but we're going to call them NREM3 disorders that are common in children. A more technical name would be examples of parasomnia, some abnormal, often detrimental behaviors that can occur during sleep. The first is night terrors. Night terrors are episodes of suddenly high arousal and fright. What's important here is a night terror is not the same thing as a nightmare. The word nightmare is not in and of itself a really technical word. It would just be a bad dream or a dream with some type of a negative context to it. A night terror, on the other hand, is an individual that experiences this rush of arousal, and it can cause that individual to scream, to jump, to do all of these clear movement-based things, which, as we alluded to in the previous essential task, would not correlate with dreaming. In theory, most of your dreams occur during REM, the vast majority, when your body is paralyzed. So you wouldn't be exhibiting the movement that you see when somebody is experiencing a night terror. So this is not a dream. This is not a nightmare. That's an important distinction to be made. Do watch the clip in the top right corner. You'll see examples of night terrors, and then you will also see examples of sleepwalking and sleep talking. I'm going to combine sleepwalking and talking because you could basically define it and just shift around the behavior. So whether it's sleepwalking or sleep talking, these are both behaviors where individuals perform behaviors that they would normally do when consciously awake. However, that person is technically still sleeping, and in the morning has virtually no memory of that because they were technically sleeping when it happened. Whether that's walking, which in and of itself could entail going to the fridge and eating, it could entail turning on the shower, it could unfortunately entail doing something dangerous like turning on the boiler, like turning on the heater, increasing the heat in your house. I mean, you could do things like turn the oven on, which are very dangerous. And then obviously sleep talking, which is in many ways what it sounds like. It's important to note that most of these things occur when you are younger and occur during NREM 3, which might be a little bit surprising because that's your deepest form of sleep. As you age, you typically grow out of both of these, though you can technically still exhibit either of them when you're older. It's important to note that more often than not, these do not occur during REM, particularly sleepwalking. You're really not going to see somebody sleepwalk during REM. There's a possibility at times of people sleep talking during REM, but it might be part of a broader diagnosis of a REM disturbance. Sleepwalking and sleep talking occur during NREM 3 again. Your body is paralyzed during REM, so you're not going to be walking around the house in the middle of sleepwalking during REM sleep. So that point needs to be made really clear that these actually occur in your deepest stage of sleep, something that might be relatively surprising when watching this concept map.